I never planned to keep my success a secret. Life just worked out that way. Growing up in Singapore, my parents drilled into me the value of hard work and education. "Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you," my father would say, as he drove his taxi late into the night to fund my studies. My mother worked 2 jobs, and together they made sure I had everything I needed to excel. Their sacrifice paid off. I graduated top of my class in finance and landed a position at one of Asia's largest banks. By 28, I was the youngest division head in the bank's history, managing over $50 billion in corporate loans. But few knew this side of me. I met Alex at my friend's small cafe where I loved to work on weekends, helping out just to stay grounded. He walked in one rainy morning, ordered a latte, and smiled when I drew a little heart in the foam. "This is the best coffee I've had in months," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "The secret is making it with care," I replied, wiping down the counter. He came back every weekend after that. We talked about everything: his work as an architect, his dreams of designing sustainable buildings, his close relationship with his family. I found myself looking forward to our conversations, enjoying how he saw me for who I was, not what I owned. When he finally asked me out, I said yes without hesitation. Our first date was at a humble hawker center, sharing plates of char kway teow and laughing about nothing in particular. I fell in love with his kindness, his integrity, and how he treated everyone with respect, regardless of their status. "My family is a bit traditional," Alex warned me before our first dinner with them. "They can be judgmental about status and career." "Don't worry," I assured him. "I can handle it." I wasn't prepared for Richard Tan, Alex's father. A self-made real estate tycoon, he dominated every room he entered. His wife, Eleanor, was equally intimidating in her designer clothes and perfectly coiffed hair. Alex's sister, Vivian, took after their mother, down to her dismissive glance when I mentioned working at a cafe. "A cafe?" Richard's voice boomed across the dinner table. "Alex, I thought you said she went to university." "She did, Dad. Emily has a degree in—" "Clearly not putting it to good use," Richard interrupted. "In this family, we believe in ambition, excellence, not serving coffee." I saw Alex's face redden, but he stayed silent. Eleanor touched her pearl necklace, a habit I'd learned meant she was about to deliver a carefully crafted insult. "Dear, perhaps you could help Emily find a more suitable position. The cleaning company we use is always hiring." Vivian snickered. At least she'd have health insurance. I maintained my composure, years of high-stakes negotiations serving me well. "I enjoy my current work, but thank you for your concern." The rest of dinner passed in a blur of subtle digs and patronizing advice. Alex apologized profusely on the drive home. "They'll come around," he promised. "They just need time to know you." But they didn't. Over the next year, as Alex and I grew closer, his family's disdain only intensified. Every family gathering became an exercise in endurance. Richard never missed an opportunity to remind everyone of my humble station. Eleanor orchestrated seating arrangements to keep me far from important guests. Vivian openly suggested Alex find someone more appropriate. When Alex proposed, their reaction was predictable. "A cafe worker?" Richard exploded. "Have you lost your mind?" "Dad, I love her." Alex stood firm. "Love won't maintain our family standing," Richard shot back. "If you marry her, don't expect any support from me." But Alex chose me. We had a small, beautiful wedding without his family present. Months passed. I continued my weekend cafe shifts, finding peace in the simple work while managing billion-dollar deals during the week. Alex respected my choice to keep my career private, understanding my need to be loved for myself, not my position. Then came the annual Tan family reunion. "We have to go," Alex insisted. "They're still family." I agreed, hoping time had softened their hearts. I was wrong. The reunion was held at Richard's mansion, a sprawling estate that screamed old money. The moment we arrived, I felt the familiar weight of judgmental stares. "Oh, the cafe girl still hasn't found a real job?" Vivian's voice carried across the garden. "How persistent," Richard chuckled. He gathered everyone for his annual family address, champagne flowing freely as he boasted about the family's achievements. Then he spotted us. "Ah, Alex. Come tell everyone about your new project." His eyes slid past me. "And your wife can serve drinks. It's what she's good at. Yes?" Laughter rippled through the crowd. Alex opened his mouth to protest, but before he could speak, a commotion erupted near the house. Richard's secretary came running out, face pale. "Mr. Tan, urgent call from the bank." "Not now." Richard waved her off. "We're celebrating." "Sir, it's about the emergency loans. They're denied." Richard's smile faltered. "Impossible. I spoke with the division head yesterday." "No, sir. The new CEO is reviewing all major loans personally. They're requesting a meeting tomorrow." I felt my phone vibrate, my own secretary calling. I knew what this was about. Richard's company had been flagged for suspicious accounting, and as CEO of the corporate banking division, I had ordered a complete audit. The timing couldn't have been more perfect. "Excuse me," I said quietly, stepping away from the crowd to take my call. "Ma'am," my secretary whispered, "Chen Development's financials are worse than we thought. The audit shows systematic misrepresentation of assets." "Send me the files," I replied. "I'll review them tonight." When I returned, Richard was in full crisis mode. His face had lost its usual smugness, replaced by barely concealed panic. He was barking orders into his phone, while Eleanor hovered nearby, wringing her perfectly manicured hands. Vivian sidled up to me, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Looks like Daddy's company is having issues. Not that you'd understand business matters. More champagne?" I smiled politely. "No, thank you. But I do have a question. How's your position at your father's company?" She preened. "I'm Executive Vice President of Operations." "Interesting. And what exactly do you do?" Her smile faltered. "I oversee things. Important things. Like the shell companies in the Cayman Islands?" Vivian's glass slipped from her fingers, shattering on the marble floor. Several heads turned our way. "I don't know what you're talking about," she hissed. "The ones hiding your father's debt, or perhaps the inflated property valuations." Before she could respond, Richard's voice boomed across the garden. "Everyone, party's over! Family emergency!" As guests began to leave, Richard pulled Alex aside. "Son, I need your help. The bank, they're being unreasonable. Your architecture firm has good relationships with other banks." Alex looked uncomfortable. "Dad, we're just a small firm. We don't handle those kinds of loans." "Useless," Richard exploded. "Just like your choice in wife. If I lose this company, it's on your head for bringing bad luck into this family." That was enough. I stepped forward, my phone in hand. "Mr. Tan, I believe we have a meeting tomorrow at 9 a.m. He barely glanced at me. "This doesn't concern you, coffee girl." "Actually, it does." I opened my banking app, displaying my executive profile. "I'm the CEO you'll be meeting." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard's face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and horror. Eleanor's pearl necklace clattered to the ground. Vivian looked like she might faint. "That's impossible," Richard stammered. "Emily Chen, CEO of Corporate Banking Division, Singapore United Bank," I stated calmly. "Your loan applications crossed my desk last week. The irregularities were concerning." Alex stared at me, mouth agape. "Emily, all this time, I wanted to be loved for who I am, not what I own," I explained softly. "You gave me that gift. Your family, not so much." Richard suddenly straightened, his businessman instincts kicking in. "Well, this is wonderful news. We're all family here. Surely we can work something out." "Family?" I echoed. "Like when you called me a gold digger at our wedding reception, or when you told your business associates that Alex married beneath his station." Eleanor stepped forward, arms outstretched. "Darling, we were just protecting our son. Surely you understand." "I understand perfectly. You judged me, humiliated me, and treated me like dirt because you thought I was beneath you. Now you want my help?" Vivian attempted damage control. "Emily, sweetie, we were just teasing. It was all in good fun. I turned to Alex. Did you know about your sister's role in the company? He shook his head. She said she was handling operations. She's been helping your father hide debt and inflate assets. The audit shows years of financial manipulation. Richard's face turned purple. Now see here, you can't just— I can and I will, I interrupted. Tomorrow's meeting isn't about loans. It's about a fraud investigation. The color drained from his face. You wouldn't dare. We're family. Family, I laughed softly. Let me share some wisdom from my father, the taxi driver you mocked at my wedding. He taught me that true family supports you, believes in you, and loves you regardless of your status. You've done none of those things. I took Alex's hand. The authorities will be contacting you tomorrow. I suggest you get your lawyers ready. As we turned to leave, Eleanor called out desperately, Wait, what about Vivian? She was just following orders. I paused at the door. Actions have consequences, Eleanor. Vivian chose to participate in fraud. She'll face the same investigation as everyone else. The drive home was silent. Finally, Alex spoke. Why didn't you tell me? Would you have treated me differently if you knew? He thought for a moment. No, I fell in love with you, not your job. That's why I fell in love with you too, I squeezed his hand. I'm sorry for keeping this from you. I just needed to know our love was real. What happens now? I sighed. Your father's company will be investigated. With the evidence we have, there will likely be criminal charges. Vivian too, if she's implicated. And us? That depends. Can you handle being married to a woman who makes more than your entire family combined? Alex laughed, the tension breaking. I think I can manage, but no more secrets. No more secrets, I promised. The next morning, the Tan family empire began to crumble. Richard arrived at my office precisely at 9 a.m., flanked by his lawyers. Gone was the arrogant tycoon. In his place sat a man who finally realized he wasn't the most powerful person in the room. The audit revealed systematic fraud spanning 5 years, I stated, sliding the report across my desk. Falsified valuations, hidden debts, shell companies. It's all here. We can explain, his lawyer began. No, the evidence has been forwarded to the authorities. Richard leaned forward. Emily, please. Think about what this will do to the family name. Name? Like you thought about my reputation when you told everyone I was a gold digger? Before he could respond, my secretary interrupted. Ma'am, the police are here. What followed was a media circus. Chen Development CEO arrested for fraud, splashed across headlines. Vivian was taken into custody next, her designer handbag clutched to her chest as officers led her away. Eleanor had a very public breakdown at the country club. Alex stood by me through it all, though I knew it pained him to see his family fall apart. They did this to themselves, he said one evening as we watched the news coverage. You just exposed the truth. Weeks turned into months. The investigation uncovered more than even I had suspected. Richard had been running a complex scheme, using inflated property valuations to secure loans, then channeling the money through shell companies. Vivian had helped coordinate the fraud, her executive position nothing more than a front. The trial was swift. Richard and Vivian were both sentenced to prison, 8 years for him, 5 for her. Eleanor was spared criminal charges but lost everything in the asset forfeitures. One day, as autumn painted Singapore's gardens in golden hues, Eleanor appeared at my office. I know I have no right to be here, she began, her designer clothes replaced by simple cotton, but I need to say something. I gestured for her to continue. I was wrong about you, so terribly wrong. Tears filled her eyes. We judged you because we thought wealth and status were everything. Now I'm alone, living in a small apartment, working as a sales clerk, and I finally understand. Understand what? That character matters more than cash. You were kind to us, even when we were cruel. You could have destroyed us completely, but you let the law take its course. That's real class. I studied her face, seeing genuine remorse for the first time. What do you want, Eleanor? A chance. Not to be close, I know I don't deserve that, but to apologize to you and Alex, to try to be better. 6 months later, we hosted a small dinner party. Eleanor came, bringing homemade dumplings, a skill she'd learned in her new life. She was different now, humbler, more genuine. Alex was healing too, visiting his father and sister in prison, working through years of family dysfunction. As for me, I kept my weekend shifts at the cafe, not because I needed to hide anymore, but because I loved the simplicity of making someone's day better with a perfect cup of coffee. One morning, a young woman came in looking defeated. "Rough day?" I asked, drawing a heart in her latte foam. "My boyfriend's parents think I'm not good enough," she sighed. "Wrong background, wrong job." I smiled, remembering where my own journey began. "Let me tell you a story about family pride and what really matters in the end. Life has a way of teaching us its most important lessons. Sometimes it takes losing everything to understand what truly matters. Richard and Vivian learned this in prison. Eleanor learned it through humility, and I learned that being true to yourself is worth more than all the wealth in the world. Alex and I are expecting our first child now. We decided to name her Grace, a reminder that sometimes the hardest situations deserve a measure of mercy. Eleanor is excited to be a grandmother, and even Richard, through his prison letters, seems to be reflecting on what kind of legacy he really wants to leave. The cafe still stands, a humble reminder of where our story began. Sometimes customers recognize me, the banking CEO who serves coffee on weekends. They often ask why I still do it. My answer is simple. Every cup of coffee is a chance to make someone's day better, and at the end of our lives, isn't that what matters most? They usually smile, understanding or not. But I know my truth. Success isn't about power or revenge or even proving others wrong. It's about staying true to yourself, showing kindness even when it's not deserved, and remembering that everyone, even those who hurt us, deserves a chance at redemption. As I write this, I'm sitting in the cafe, watching the sunrise paint the city in shades of hope. Alex will join me soon, as he does every weekend. Eleanor might stop by with her dumplings. Life isn't perfect, but it's real and rich with lessons learned. And sometimes when I'm making coffee or reviewing billion-dollar deals, I think about my father's words. Knowledge is the one thing nobody can take from you. He was right. But he missed something important. Integrity, compassion, and the courage to be yourself. Those are things nobody can take either. Story 2. I'm Emma Chen, and my narrative starts with the subtle aroma of flowers in the air and dirt beneath my fingers. My small flower store, Blooming Dreams, was a colorful oasis of life amidst the dreary monotony of steel and concrete, tucked away between the tall buildings of downtown Seattle. The spirit was released by another orchid. As Sarah, my only employee, carefully took a withered plant out of the front display, I questioned her. With a tired sigh, she answered, "This is the third one this week." Her brow furrowed. "Maybe it's time to quit stalking them." I gave a headshake, carefully removing the plant from her hands. "No. All we have to do is diagnose the issue and modify their care. With proper care, any plant may flourish. Since I was young, that idea has served as my compass. While other kids played with toys, I spent many hours in my grandmother's garden growing up in rural China, learning the unseen language of plants. I lose myself in the complexities of hybridization and nurturing. "You've got magic in your hands, Emma," my grandma would exclaim as she watched me coax ailing plants back to life. "Keep in mind that the most resilient flowers blossom during the most difficult times." She spoke in an abstract way. They were now the cornerstone of my existence. A scholarship to study botanical sciences was the first step in my journey to America. It was not an easy shift. A new language, a new culture, and a relentless drive to succeed. Yet, like the wildflowers I liked, I grew in unusual soil. I met James Wheeler in this way. He fell physically into my life during my final year of grad school. King crashed into my study greenhouse on his way to a business meeting, strewing soil samples all over the place. "I'm so sorry," he said, squatting to collect the masses. I wasn't paying attention. "What are these then?" His eyes fell on my excitement and pride. Hybrid roses. Their deep purple petals, which I had spent months refining, glistened with silver edges as if they were sprinkled with moonlight. I hurriedly said, "They're my thesis project," checking the blooms for damage. "I'm creating hardy cultivars for city settings." He said, "They're gorgeous," and I saw him for the first time. Warm eyes, a captivating grin, a tall, crisp figure, and a suit. "By the way, my name is James, and I believe you have just made my day. I need to get a customer a special present." He came back a week after I sold him 3 flowers that day, not for flowers, or to invite me to supper. Our love grew like a well-tended garden, steady, organic, and brimming with new information. James was employed in corporate finance, which is a field full of slick clothes and calculated transactions. However, I started to appreciate the structure in his work, and he saw the creativity in mine. "You perceive the world differently than anyone I've ever known." One evening when we were walking through a botanical park, he informed me, "We were married in a modest ceremony with flowers a year later. I grew specifically for the event. Before I met his family, everything was ideal. Our engagement meal was where the warning flags first surfaced." While his sister Patricia hardly concealed her smirks, James's mother, Victoria a Wheeler, examined me with cold precision. "A florist?" Victoria inquired, her voice laden with disbelief. "James, I thought you mentioned that she was a science student." James defended her master's degree in botanical sciences. "Emma's work is groundbreaking." Victoria gave a disdainful wave. "Yes, but you won't carry on with that small pastime after the wedding, I'm sure. The Wheeler name has particular criteria." James stiffened beside me, but I stood my ground, recalling my grandmother's words. "Actually," I stated equally, "after graduation, I'm going to create my own store. The lease has already been signed." The stillness was terrible. Patricia lifted an eyebrow, her lips twisting. "A store? How enterprising." "Okay." Victoria let out a sigh. "Every family is different. Just be discreet, my love." Squeeze my hand beneath the table, James. But he didn't speak out. In our otherwise flawless world, it was the first crack. Over the next 2 years, I channel my energy into my shop, a labor of love that Victoria despised. What? They were all unaware. I didn't have a plan, not even James. I created patentable hybrids while enrolled in my master's degree, longer-lasting, disease-resistant cultivars that might flourish any place. Interest was shown by suppliers, but I played my cards. Close, Emma. This is something you must see. One morning, Sarah stormed into my office with her iPad in hand. Wheeler Corp has revealed a rooftop garden project for sustainable luxury hotels. I put down my pruning shears and grinned. My in-laws were unaware that their ambitious plan was about to collide with mine. James was delighted when he got home that night. "Did you hear about the announcement? For months, Dad has been working on this. It will revolutionize the business." As I arranged a bouquet of my particular roses, I exclaimed, "That's wonderful." With hesitation, he added, "This weekend, Mom is throwing a dinner to celebrate. They want us there." I arched an eyebrow. "Is your mother certain she wants the shopkeeper to attend her event?" He showed his obvious uneasiness by running a hand through his hair. "They're making an effort." "Emma, please." I reluctantly consented. That evening, while I was closing a deal that would guarantee the future of my hybrid, I got an email that made me happy. Everything was coming together. The meal was hosted at the Wheeler estate, a home dripping with wealth and barely veiled scorn. Victoria gave me a well-practiced smile that stopped short of her eyes. "Dear, how is your store doing?" The room, still barely surviving, laughed courteously. Now a senior executive, Patricia grinned into her drink. "Really, it's charming," she continued. "For the hotel grounds, we're collaborating with elite professionals who go much beyond a retail store. If only they knew I grinned, unconcerned. As usual, the meal was a symphony of well-crafted insults and disguised digs. James was silent and uneasy, and his sporadic pitying looks did nothing to protect me from the onslaught. Even if his quiet was familiar, it still hurt. Victoria's voice pierced the room like a beautiful crystal when she continued. "So, Emma, according to James, you frequently stay in the shop till late at night. It must be hard dealing with retail shoppers all day. You must have thought of something better suited for a wheeler. I laid down my fork, carefully meeting her stare without flinching. Actually, I was interrupted when the door to the dining room cracked open. Everyone turned to see who had entered, and there was a noticeable hush that suddenly fell over the table. When Victoria saw the man standing in the doorway, her well-preserved grin wavered. "Marcus." Victoria virtually sprung out of her chair in exclamation. "What a surprise pleasure. You weren't anticipated until the board meeting the following week." Marcus Chen, a strong presence in any room, smiled cordially. His piercing gaze moved around the table before settling on me. I'd heard that tonight was a celebration. I wanted to drop by. "Hope I'm not invading." Patricia swiftly gestured to the vacant seat next to her, always keen to associate herself with authority. "Absolutely not, Marcus. Come on over. Just now we were talking about our fantastic hotel project, the Green Hotel's effort," Marcus continued, his tone betraying little. "That's really one of the reasons I'm here." His smile grew as he looked back at me. "Could we just take a minute, Emma?" The quiet was overwhelming. Victoria's well-maintained poise broke as bewilderment appeared on her face. "Do you know Emma?" Marcus gave a little laugh. "No, her. For the past 2 years, Emma has been one of our most valued collaborators. You're employing those cutting-edge hybrid plants in your hotel project. All of them are her inventions." Victoria's countenance locked in, smiling. Everyone in the room appeared to hold their breath. Patricia stumbled. "That's not possible. She owns and operates a little flower store. In recent years, a flower store has served as a hub for some of the most cutting-edge botanical research." Marcus made a seamless correction. "Emma's hybrids are transforming, gorgeous, robust, and just what the Asian market requires. That's actually the reason I'm here tonight." Taking an envelope out of his jacket pocket, he took a step forward. "Emma, the board accepted your terms. For all 15 of your patented varieties, we are prepared to move forward with exclusive distribution rights." James's voice was raspy when he finally spoke. "What's going on, Emma?" I inhaled deeply as I felt the gravity of the situation. "Do you recall the hybrid cultivars I worked on in graduate school? The ones you described as amazing. Since then, I've been honing them. They can now be produced in large quantities." "Large-scale manufacturing." Victoria reverberated softly, as though the words were alien. "Yes," Marcus responded, obviously having a good time. "Emma's hybrids are ideally suited to luxury hotels and high-end buildings. They are beautiful, long-lasting, and most importantly, unique. Just the licensing fees are high." The stillness was broken when Patricia's champagne flutes fell from her fingers and landed on the table. Like a bloodstain, the deep crimson liquid smeared across the spotless tablecloth. Nobody stepped up to tidy it. "However, you're only a florist, though," Victoria sputtered. "You water plants and put together bouquets." "Calmly," I said, "has served as my lab for research and development. Every arrangement and every plant has been used in an experiment. We have years' worth of data, information that is currently very useful." Marcus gave a nod. "For this reason, we are continuing to license. Emma, we want to support your further research. The board is ready to propose a development budget of $50 million each year." As Victoria's world fell apart, her face lost its hue. James looked at me as if he had never seen me before. Patricia's lips opened and closed. "Words cannot escape." Patricia found her voice at last. "How come you didn't tell us? Did you think I was real?" I asked fairly. "You have made it apparent that you consider me to be a mere merchant ever since I entered this family, someone lower than you. If I told you, would anything change?" Yet, Ginny was known to James. Victoria went to her son and demanded in an accusing tone. James gently shook his head. "I had no idea." Silently, I said, "You succeeded. You got what you were hoping for, just like the rest of your family." Regaining focus on the room, Marcus cleared his throat. "And there's another thing. Considering how crucial Emma's hybrids are to the hotel concept, she should be in charge of the whole supply chain. To that aim, we're seeking to buy majority stake in Wheeler Corp's botanical business." Victoria's carefully preserved poise was abruptly broken by her head. "Breaking." Do you want us to let her know? In fact, I interrupted. I do already. I complete the acquisition of your main supplier, Greenleaf Industries. Chaos broke out this morning. As Patricia yelled about corporate hierarchy and treachery, Victoria fell back in her chair and gripped her fan as if it would boost her waning self-esteem. James remained silent. His quiet was more audible than the din around us. This is not acceptable. At last, Victoria screamed. You can't let this happen, James. My voice was forceful as I turned to face my spouse. James has never participated in your continual insults, and he has never participated in my business choices either. I don't think he will speak up now, just as he didn't then. Emma, James began weakly, but I stopped him off with a look. Marcus gave my shoulder a little pat. Should we? As we walked out of the dining room, he inquired, holding the contracts. We were followed by Victoria's then strained voice. James, take action. However, nothing more could be done. Only the truth they had refused to see remained after the walls of their presumptions had collapsed. In my spacious office at Chenagora Corpware CLHQ, Marcus and I complete the contracts. The city lights served as a reminder of my progress, glimmering like far-off stars. You had time to tell them, Marcus said as he observed me signing the last paper. Would it have changed anything? I inquired. They needed this opportunity to realize how much it cost to underestimate James and someone else. With the pen hanging over the page, I paused. That is a discussion for another day. James was waiting for me when I got home, his shadow outlined by the darker window. Did you ever intend to inform me? His voice was quiet as he inquired. Would you have listened? I retorted. Or would you have only witnessed what your relatives do? His voice broke as he replied, That's not fair. I cherished you for your true self. Did you? Quietly, I asked. Or did you find the concept of a woman who made you appear open-minded appealing? You could see past the florist. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The weeks that followed that disastrous dinner party were a turning point for Wheeler Corp and the people that revolved around it. As word of the revelation swept through Seattle's business community like wildfire, it changed relationships and reshaped the power structure of an elite that took great care in looks. Ever the perfect social strategist, Victoria Wheeler started a campaign to repair her reputation, although it wasn't always successful. At a well-known charity banquet, she made the announcement. She spoke in a deliberately loud voice. We just believed in allowing her freedom to realize it. Sarah, my shop manager and new informant, enjoyed sharing these memories, even if I wasn't there. One morning, barely able to contain her laughter, Sarah reported that she had stopped by the shop. I glanced up from the study paper I was reading and asked whether she might be added to our private customer list. What were you saying? That we don't accept retail customers anymore, Sarah grinned. Her face should have been visible to you. Meanwhile, Patricia discovered that her previously unchallenged authority at Wheeler Corp was quickly eroding. Previously disbelieving board members now turned to me for advice on important choices. Quiet, firm corrections greeted her attempts to regain control. During our inaugural board meeting, her suggestion for the hotel gardens was examined by me. These estimates for maintenance are out of date. Comparative data appeared on the screen as I pointed it out. The hybrids need particular attention. Unless you wish, we employ conventional types, which would contradict the uniqueness we've sold. Patricia's cheeks reddened as she slumped back in her chair, hushed by the weight of facts as corporate rivalries played out in boardrooms. At home, a more private and subdued reckoning took place. James and I cautiously went around each other. Our marriage's foundations were unsteady. I discovered him looking at the framed patterns on the wall in my home office one evening. He touched the glass with his fingertips and remarked, I remember when you created this. They seemed like lovely flowers to me. They were never only flowers, James. I said that they were my future and my hopes. I also made an effort to share them with you. He turned, his features etched with frustration and guilt. Why did he confide the truth in me? Because silence isn't trust, I answered. You remained silent each time your family rejected me or disparaged my efforts. I learned all I needed to know from that silence. I was attempting to maintain harmony. No, I said quietly. The simple route was what you were doing. Richard Wheeler, an unexpected guest, arrived the following day. The silent onlooker usually stood at the door of my office. Could I enter? He inquired. Curious, I pointed to the chair across from me. I must apologize to you, he said. I've seen Victoria and Patricia denigrate you for 2 years, and I didn't say anything improper. Why now? With caution, I inquired. Remorse dampened his expression. Since you have, why? I never dared to question the Wheeler method of doing things. Leadership, not heritage, is what this organization needs. I was given a folder by him. I'm leaving my position as chairman. I want to suggest you as my replacement. Startled, I blinked. It's surprising. Before I could reply, he said simply, You've already proven yourself. James rushed into the space. The sound of his dispute with my helper reverberated across the corridor. When he saw his father, he froze. Why have you come here, Dad? Richard stood adjusting his tie. For once, the correct thing. I told James what had happened after Richard had departed. Feeling overpowered, he collapsed into a chair. Wheeler Corporation chairman. He whispered, James, why are you here? Gently, I inquired. He raised his head, a mixture of vulnerability and resolve in his gaze. I have been thinking about you a lot. About me. I've been the ideal Wheeler son for years, never questioning anything. And I let you down in the process. I wish to put things right. How? I inquired. He added, I've asked to be transferred to the Asian division. I'd want to accompany you if you'll let me, as your partner, not as the Wheeler heir. Tears pricked my eyes. This is where you leave everything. Without you, everything I'm leaving is pointless, he stated plainly. Victoria threw another dinner party 2 months later. Naturally, I was not present. I was in Singapore with James, supervising the building of my hybrid gardens at a prestigious hotel. A video of Victoria tipsy and effusive entertaining visitors with stories about her intelligent daughter-in-law was provided to me by Sarah. Patricia, on the other hand, had accepted a job with a competitor company because she couldn't stand the new dynamics at the organization. I collaborated with Richard, who is currently an advisor, to guide Wheeler Corp into its next phase. As our jet dipped into Singapore's magnificent skyline, James, eager for a fresh experience, grabbed for my hand. He inquired. I squeezed his hand and grinned. Always. Claiming titles or proving others incorrect wasn't the true victory. It was in remaining loyal to myself and fostering my goals amidst the turbulence of criticism and uncertainty. Because I had always thought that even the smallest seed could become something remarkable. With the right attention, perseverance, and patience, my tiny flower business had grown into a legacy that no one could have predicted but me. Story 3. I'm Jennifer Chen. Hello. My parents taught me as a child that hard effort and humility are the keys to real prosperity. I was fascinated by the financial market, whereas other children aspired to become physicians or attorneys. To the astonishment of my parents, I started reading investing books and compulsively following market patterns by the time I was 12. Perhaps you ought to get out with your buddies more, my dear. My mother would advise me to look at piles of financial reports. Mom, I'm having fun with this, I'd reply without looking up. Did you know that at the age of 11, Warren Buffett purchased his first stock? She shook her head and laughed. Just swear to me that while you're building your empire, you won't forget to live. As my pastime developed into a passion and then into skill, it became more difficult to fulfill that commitment. By the time I was 16, I was using my allowance and savings to manage a small portfolio, so being awarded a full scholarship to Harvard to study finance felt like fate. Michael and I met. Charming and ambitious, he was pursuing a degree in business administration with the goal of moving up the corporate ladder. We were grabbing for the same economics textbook when we first met during finals week. He smiled warmly and replied, "Ladies first." I chuckled. "Regards. I'm Jennifer Michael. We might study together, perhaps." What started out as a study session turned into frequent coffee dates and, eventually, a relationship that was unlike any other I had ever experienced. Michael thought I was ambitious. He would observe me analyze market patterns and declare, "You're going to rule the business world." Any business would be fortunate to have you on board. He was unaware that I had no intention of working for anybody else. Everything was covered by my scholarship, so I invested my profits. My portfolio had increased significantly by the time I graduated. However, I said nothing. Success on my terms was what I want, not like the trust money girl. Michael secured a prominent position at Boston's Sterling Industries, a significant IT company. Michael was dubious when I turned down many high-profile opportunities, even though I had decided to work on my own. "Are you certain?" he inquired. "These are fantastic chances." I smiled and said, "I have my own plans. Believe me." We were married in a low-key ceremony a year later. Patricia, Michael's mother, wasn't quite happy with my choice of profession. Consultancy for investments. She would smirk. "Is that a job at all?" I grinned, recalling my parents' advice about keeping modest. Although no one, not even Michael, knew, my portfolio was intelligently diversified, valued over $50 million, and I was one of Sterling's biggest individual shareholders. Michael flourished at Sterling, moving through the ranks to work under James Wilson, the pompous VP of Operations. Wilson was notorious for his antiquated beliefs, particularly with regard to women. He would argue that women forgetting their role is the issue with contemporary marriages. Michael would laugh uncomfortably to avoid conflict. Even though it annoyed me, I ignored it until the yearly executive party. As a significant stakeholder, I had an interest in going to Sterling's restructuring plans. "Do you really want to attend?" Michael inquired. "These gatherings might be uninteresting for non-workers. I believe it's time for me to examine your work more closely," I answered, putting on my makeup with care. I wore a timeless black dress, pearl earrings, a talisman, and my grandmother's old watch, along with all of my important choices. As we arrived, the hotel ballroom was a hive of activity. The aroma of champagne permeated the air, and crystal chandeliers glistened above. James Wilson was gripping Courtney of the bar when Michael took me to him. "Jennifer." Michael James raised his glass and called. We were just discussing Sterling's great new path, slashing RD for short-term earnings. I pretended to be innocent as I inquired, "Isn't sustainable growth fueled by innovation?" James paused his smile. "On business, the tiny wife has opinions. Does she?" The gang erupts in laughter. Michael made an uncomfortable shift. "She enjoys reading financial news," he remarked hastily. "Honey, maybe we should get some beverages." James wasn't finished, though. Sterling openly declared that his main issue was the abundance of voices from individuals who don't understand real business, such as housewives who believe they are experts because they read the Wall Street Journal. While the audience laughed, I saw Thomas Richards, the CEO, observing with curiosity. Once, before I could say anything, my husband, who was so proud of my brilliance, looked at his shoes. A well-known voice cut in. "Well, James, you may want to reconsider that." My confidant and private banker, Sarah Martinez, came forward. Her grin was piercing. "Jennifer, should I explain? Or do you want to?" James's arrogant face wavered. "What's happening?" My grandmother's watch pressed on my wrist when I straightened. The time had arrived. "Because shareholder wealth is your top priority." "James," I said in a composed tone, "maybe we should talk about the report I'm bringing to the board meeting on Monday, the one explaining why your strategy for restructuring will not work." At the Crimson board meeting, James became red. "What are you discussing?" Richards, the CEO, came forward. His face was thoughtful. JSI Holdings, Jennifer Chin. The name seemed familiar to me. I grinned. Unexpected. Being strategically anonymous can be a useful tactic. "What's happening?" With a pale face and a quivering voice, Michael whispered. Sarah moved forward, her voice breaking the stillness. "Your spouse," she told everyone in the room, "less than 51% of the shares of the Sterling industry. She no longer spends her days shopping either." Before mayhem broke out, there was a brief period of stillness. A bright crimson flush came across James Wilson's cheeks. I had no idea it was possible to cycle through shade. Michael appeared on the verge of fainting. "This is ridiculous," James sputtered. Sarah must have made a mistake when she wrote it. Tapped her iPad. "If you would like, I can show you the documentation. I have all the records right here." With a faint smile pulling at the corners of his mouth, CEO Richards took a step forward. That won't be required, Sarah. For a while I had a suspicion. For years the board has been impressed by Mrs. Chan's observations and suggestions. Stunned, James turned to him. You were aware. Naturally, Richards answered with ease. Why, in your opinion, hasn't your restructuring proposal been accepted, Mrs. Chen voiced serious concerns. At last, while it faltered, Michael found his voice. Jennifer, how? When I looked him in the eyes. Maybe we should have this discussion in a more private setting, I proposed, looking around at the swell of spectators. Just upstairs is my workplace. Richards made the offer. Should we? The silence in the elevator was deafening. James was fuming, and Michael was looking at the floor and then at me. Sarah was by my side, as solid as ever. A silent, yet resolute presence. Richard had a large office with sweeping views of the Boston skyline. As we sat down, as if authority could be restored by proximity, James instantly took the chair closest to Richard's desk, and Richard started to recline in his chair. This evening has been rather exciting. Eventful. James blew up. This is ridiculous. There is no way she could. She is able to, and does. Sarah paused and placed papers on the desk. Jennifer Chen owns 51% of Sterling Industries through well-managed investment entities. Over the last 5 years, she has been advancing in her role. Michael's face changes from bewilderment to pain. 5 years. But we've been married for 3. Prior to our meeting, I began investing in Sterling. I gave a fair explanation of the company's potential and the need for modernization. I spotted an opportunity. Modernization. James gave a smirk. Yes, I said quietly, James. Modernization. Such as encouraging invention rather than obtaining RD. Such as treating your staff with respect rather than fostering a hostile work environment. Richards bent over. Our strategy has been greatly influenced by Mrs. Chen's suggestions. Her analysis has consistently outperformed expectations. Michael's voice could hardly be heard. How come you didn't tell me? I looked him in the eye. Would it have changed anything? If James had known that I was the majority shareholder in Sterling, would you have stood up for me against his remarks? He winced, the response obvious even without words. This is ridiculous. James sprang up from his seat and gave a bark. I've committed 15 years to Sterling. It cannot simply be transformed into a poisonous atmosphere that inhibits creativity and brilliance. James, I cut you off. Your plan for restructuring would ruin this business. It will not be supported by the board. Richards interrupted. Actually, we need to talk to Sterling about your future. My future? James seemed stunned. Indeed. I remarked, getting up to give him a frown. Your leadership style is out of date. Your tactics lack foresight, and your behavior is intolerable. Sterling is worthy of better. Don't fire me, James yelled. Sarah said coolly, You're just a majority shareholder. Indeed, she is able to. Michael didn't move, his face inscrutable. He said, You told me you were consulting. It was small scale, you stated. I never told lies. I said quietly. I simply didn't tell you all of it. If I had, would you have accepted my choices? James exploded once more, gesturing to Michael. We are being torn apart by her. She is liked by women. That's sufficient. Richard snapped his tone. Shake. The specifics of your separation package will be sent to you tomorrow, James. Leave now, please. James slammed the door behind him and rushed out. Sarah excused herself, so Richards and Michael and I were left alone. Richard said, Mrs. Chen. Will your involvement in the firm increase? Yes, I said firmly. Beginning with a thorough analysis of our leadership and culture, Michael eventually spoke, his voice breaking. And what about us? I spoke steadily as I turned to face him. It depends. Are you ready to see me as an equal? Am I still the tiny wife or what? You requested silence at what time? Events for the company. He stood up suddenly and said, I need time. All of this is excessive. He went, and I observed his fading form. Richards cleared his throat. Business and family don't usually get along. True, I murmured, letting out a long sigh. However, Values shouldn't be sacrificed. The days that followed were a flurry. James's dismissal garnered media attention. At the top, Sterling Industries a shakeup. As word spread about my vision for the firm, the stock price temporarily dropped before rising again. Michael remained with his parents as he dealt with the situation. I immediately erased a series of angry voicemails left by his mother. I continued to concentrate on changing Sterling, reviving RD, putting work-life balance rules into place, and encouraging creativity. Michael came back a week later. He appeared worn out, with fatigue taking the place of his customary polish. "Can we have a conversation?" He hesitated before asking. I pointed to the chair on the other side of my desk. He sat and then got up again, pacing uneasily. "I've been considering everything," he said. "About us. About my job." And I asked. "I was mistaken," he said softly. "I tolerated insults from James and others. I ought to have defended you. I lost sight of what truly matters because I was so preoccupied with my career." I paused to observe him before responding. "Michael, words cannot bring about change. It manifests in deeds. Are you prepared to demonstrate your regard for me as an equal?" His eyes flickered with resolve as he nodded. "I am indeed." I gave him room to continue as I waited quietly. "But you weren't fully honest either." "In a minute," Michael added. "You withheld a significant portion of your life from me. With such secrets, how can we really have a true marriage?" "You're right," I said calmly, admitting. "I should have put my faith in you to tell the truth. But why didn't I feel like I could, Michael?" With his hands raking through his hair, he sunk into the chair. "Because I shown my unreliability to you. Every time I told you to keep quiet or laughed at James's jokes, I demonstrated that office politics were more important to me than helping my wife. My marriage, my determination, and my capacity to lead Sterling Industries through significant change were all put to the test over the course of the following several weeks." James Wilson had not left in silence. His buddies within the workplace whispered behind my back that he had engaged a lawyer and threatened to sue for wrongful termination. They whispered in the break room, "She's destroying our traditions." This is the result of allowing feelings to control a business. Facts don't lie, yet others scoffed. Within a month, employee satisfaction increased by 40%, and RD submitted 12 patent applications after being released from James's suffocating hold. The steady increase in the stock price demonstrated that my modifications were not only drastic, they were necessary. Michael hung in a weird limbo at home, being cautious around me and sleeping in the guest room, but Patricia, his mother, did not hesitate in the same way. One afternoon, her high-end shoes clicking like gunshots, she barged into our home. "We must speak," she said, hardly stopping before entering the living room. "By all means." Dryly, I murmured as I shut the door after her. "You've gone too far with this power trip," she said, folding her arms. "Your point has been made. Now take a back seat and let the men do the work." I arched an eyebrow. "The males. Michael has been humiliated by you." "Already enough," she yelled. "His co-workers no longer know how to handle him. Are you aware of the impact this is having on his career?" I repeated in embarrassment. Similar to being made fun of at business events, like being written off as only a homemaker. That's not the same. She dismissively waved a manicured hand. "That's the nature of business. Men must. What is required?" Patricia undercut women to boost up their egos. If competence comes from the incorrect gender, act as though it doesn't exist. She exploded because you had deceived him. My son thought you were a typical wife when he married you. And now? What comes next? Michael's words broke the tense silence. Michael is also Starling. Patricia's face softened with relief as she turned to face him. "I'm glad to have you here. Before she ruins everything, we must reason with her." Michael, however, was not observing her. For something I hadn't seen in weeks, his gaze was fixed on me. "Understanding," he responded calmly. "Ma'am, you must go." "What?" "Now, however," he stated firmly. After she departed, between us, silence descended. Michael flopped down on the sofa. His face was etched with exhaustion. He murmured softly, "I heard everything," and it dawned on me that I had been exactly like her. treating you as though he needed to be controlled rather than encouraged. I apologize as well. I took a seat next to him but kept a safe distance. Michael, I didn't want to overshadow you. All I wanted was your respect as your spouse, partner, and individual. You have it, he said quietly. I want to gain your trust even though I know I don't now deserve it. I adore you, not because of your wealth or influence, and I want to be the companion you are worthy of. The moment was interrupted when my phone chimed. It was Sarah. Jennifer, she said when I replied. James has withdrawn his case. Sterling's most recent quarterly estimates have caused concern, and they're impressive. Give me the information. I smiled as I spoke. And thanks for everything, Sarah. Michael inquired after I hung up. Good news. James is giving in, I attested. Success appears to be the finest kind of retaliation. Michael gave a contemplative nod. What is going on with us and Sterling now? Sterling will continue to change. We're starting a mentorship program for women in tech next month, and we're implementing a new parental leave policy, I said. And us? With hesitation in his voice, he inquired. I inhaled deeply. It depends. Are you prepared for an equal marriage? Are you really prepared? I want to try. He remarked, a faint smile pulling at his lips, commencing with moving out of the guest room. If you're good with that, it's hurting my back. I laughed, surprised myself. You'll have to confront your mother, and we'll need couples counseling. He smiled and replied, Done. But perhaps we might get together for supper the following week. When you describe your women's leadership effort, I would want to see her face. I had genuine hope for our future for the first time in weeks. Story 4. I often find myself thinking about how different my life could have been if my parents hadn't divorced when I was 7. Back then, I was just Jessica Thompson, a regular kid living with my mom and dad in a cozy house they'd bought together. I remember those early years being filled with simple joys, family dinners, weekend trips to the park, and bedtime stories read by both parents. Everything changed when they split up. Dad moved out, but left us the house and made sure we were taken care of financially. He paid enough in alimony that Mom didn't need to work, which she seemed pretty happy about. A year later, Mom met Steve. He seemed nice enough at first, always bringing candy when he visited, and trying to make me laugh. They got married pretty quickly, and soon after my half-sister Cindy was born. That's when things started to change. Steve began giving me these looks like I was somehow in the way. He'd make little comments when Mom wasn't around. Stuff like, "Don't you miss your dad? Or wouldn't you rather live with him?" I was 12 when I overheard the conversation that would change everything. Look, Steve was saying, his voice low but firm. I got that promotion at work. My salary's nearly doubled. You won't need to work, or Jessica's child support, but that money helps, Mom replied. It pays for a lot. Come on, Sarah. We both know Jessica would be better off with her father. Plus, wouldn't it be nice to just focus on our family, on Cindy, the way she didn't hesitate before? Agreeing is something I'll never forget. You're right. I'll call Mark tomorrow about taking Jessica. I stood there in the darkness, my hand pressed against my mouth to keep from making a sound. The glass of water I'd wanted lay forgotten as I processed what I just heard. My own mother was trading me away because she didn't need my father's money anymore. Looking back now, I wonder if they ever knew I heard that conversation. Mom acted like she was doing me a favor when she told me I'd be moving in with Dad. You'll have more opportunities there, she said, as if she wasn't just getting rid of me because I'd become financially inconvenient. Dad welcomed me with open arms, no questions asked. He'd set up a room for me in his apartment, painted at my favorite color, and filled the bookshelf with all the series. I loved reading that first night at his place. He sat on the edge of my bed and said, I'm sorry things worked out this way, kiddo, but I want you to know something. You'll always have a home with me. Always. Those words became my anchor in the years that followed, while Mom busied herself with her new family, barely checking in except for obligatory holiday calls. Dad was there for everything. School plays, parent-teacher conferences. The time I got my heart broken by my first crush, he made sure I got into a good private school, encouraged my interests, and never made me feel like I was a burden. When college applications came around, he sat with me night after night, reviewing essays and helping me research schools. I still remember the day my acceptance letter from Princeton arrived. Dad's eyes were welling up as he read it. "You did it, kiddo," he said, pulling me into a bear hug. "I always knew you would. College was expensive, but Dad never complained. Your education is my priority," he'd say whenever I brought up the cost. Those 4 years flew by, and before I knew it, I was graduating with honors and had landed a job at one of the top consulting firms in the city. I rented a nice apartment downtown, not too far from Dad's place. We had dinner together every Sunday, just like we had since I was 12. He'd ask about my work, and I'd tell him about my latest projects. Sometimes we'd just sit in comfortable silence, watching old movies like we used to when I was in high school. Everything was perfect until it wasn't. The diagnosis came out of nowhere: stage 4 pancreatic cancer, 6 months, the doctor said. They were optimistic. Dad only made up for... I was 28 when I lost him. The last few weeks were brutal. I took leave from work to be with him in the hospital. One night near the end, he squeezed my hand and said, "You were the best thing in my life." Jessica, never forget that. After he passed, I discovered he'd left me everything: his beautiful apartment in the city center and $700,000 in his accounts. I couldn't even think about the money. I just missed my dad. A month after the funeral, my phone rang. I almost dropped it when I saw Mom on the caller ID. "Jessica." Her voice was hesitant. "I heard about your father. I'm so sorry. I hadn't heard from her in years." "Thanks," I managed to say. "I know this might not be the best time, but Steve passed away too recently. Heart attack." She paused. "I've been thinking about you a lot. Maybe it was grief making me vulnerable, or maybe I just wanted to believe people could change. But I found myself agreeing to meet her for coffee. One coffee turned into regular visits. I met Cindy properly for the first time since she was a baby. She was 21 now, bouncing between job interviews and seemingly directionless. Mom was working as a cashier at the local supermarket, a far cry from her days of not needing to work. I started visiting them several times a month. I told them about my travels, weekend trips to different states, my vacations in Europe. I always brought them gifts: designer clothes for Cindy, nice perfumes for Mom, little luxuries they couldn't afford themselves. It felt good in a way. Being able to share my success with them, it became a routine. I couldn't show up at Mom's place empty-handed, even if I was just dropping by for a quick coffee. I'd feel guilty if I didn't bring something. The local mall became my regular stop before any visit. Cindy especially loved the clothes I brought back from Europe. Her eyes would light up every time I pulled out something from my suitcase. "Oh my God, Jess, is this really from that boutique in Paris?" she'd squeal, holding up whatever designer piece I'd brought her. At first I enjoyed their reactions. Maybe I was trying to buy the affection I never got as a kid. I'd carefully pick out things I thought they'd like: a cashmere sweater for Mom, a leather handbag for Cindy. Then one day, I decided to ask what they actually wanted. Oh, I couldn't possibly. Mom started looking down at her coffee cup. Maybe just some new towels from Target. Cindy was equally hesitant at first. Maybe some drugstore makeup. But something shifted after that. The requests started getting bigger, more frequent. Mom went from asking for towels to texting me entire shopping lists. "Hey, honey, one text read, when you're in Milan next month, could you pick up that Gucci bag we saw online? And Cindy really needs new winter clothes. Prada would be nice. Oh, and we're running low on groceries." I stared at my phone, my stomach turning. The list kept getting longer, more demanding. It wasn't just luxury items anymore. They expected me to cover their basic expenses to one evening after receiving yet another lengthy list. I decided enough was enough. I drove to their house, determined to have a serious conversation. "Mom, Cindy, we need to talk about these requests," I said, sitting at their kitchen table. Mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "What do you mean, sweetie?" "The lists, the constant asking for things. It's getting out of hand." "Oh, come on," Cindy rolled her eyes. "It's not like you can't afford it. You're loaded." "That's not the point," I replied, trying to keep my boy steady. "Yes, I have money, but..." "But what?" Cindy interrupted. "You're just going to hoard it all while your family struggles. You've got that fancy apartment, you're always traveling, and you can't help out your poor family. You're rich. Your dad left her all that money and you're being selfish. I felt my face getting hot. Selfish. That money came from the parent who actually wanted me. The one who didn't trade me away when I became inconvenient. The room went dead silent. It's my money, I said, finally standing up. And I'll decide how to spend it. Real nice, Jess, Cindy spat. Real nice way to treat your family. I walked out, slamming the door behind me. For the next month, my phone stayed silent. No calls, no texts, no list of demands. Part of me was hurt, but another part felt relieved. After a month of silence, my phone rang. It was Mom, Jessica. Honey, could you come over? I need to talk to you about something important. There was something in her voice that made me worry. Despite our recent argument, I found myself driving to her house that afternoon. Mom was sitting at the kitchen table when I arrived, looking more subdued than usual. Cindy hovered nearby, her face uncharacteristically serious. What's going on? I asked, taking a seat. Mom reached across the table and grabbed my hand. I've been to see a doctor, Jessica. It's my knee. They say I need surgery right away. A total knee replacement. My stomach dropped. How serious is it? Dairy, she said, her voice trembling. The doctor says, if I don't get it done soon, I could end up disabled. I wouldn't be able to work anymore. I thought about Dad, how quickly things had gone downhill after his diagnosis, how helpless I'd felt watching him suffer. The thing is, Mom continued, the best specialist for this kind of surgery is in Arizona. They've got a spot open, but she paused, glancing at Cindy. The whole thing, surgery, hospital stay, rehabilitation, it's going to cost $70,000. $70,000. I repeated. I know it's a lot, Mom said quickly, but Cindy will come with me to help during recovery. The whole treatment and rehabilitation will take about a month. I sat there, memories of Dad's last months flooding back, the hospital corridors, the beeping machines, the helpless feeling of watching someone you love suffer. I couldn't let that happen again. Not if I could prevent it. I'll help, I heard myself say, but I can't give you the whole amount at once. I can give you half now. $35,000 and the other half when I get the hospital bill. Mom's face darkened, but I need all of it up front. The hospital? Mom, I interrupted. That's all I can do right now. I need to be smart about this. She started to protest, but Cindy put a hand on her shoulder. They exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. Actually, Mom said, her tone shifting. Let me call the hospital. Maybe I can arrange to pay in 2 installments. She left the room with her phone, and I heard her voice drifting from the hallway. A few minutes later, she returned, looking relieved. They said it would be fine, she announced. We can pay half now and half after the surgery. The next few days were a blur of preparations. I transferred the first $35,000 to Mom's account. A week later, I helped them pack their bags and drove them to the airport. A few days after Mom and Cindy left, I was sitting in my home office reviewing some work documents when my phone buzzed. The name that popped up made me smile. Rachel Martinez, my best friend from elementary school. We'd known each other since we were 6, but after I moved in with Dad, we mostly kept in touch through social media. Recently, we'd started meeting up again for coffee and catching up on lost time. Hey, Rach, what's up? Jess? There was something odd in her voice. I need to ask you something weird. Did you know your mom and sister are in Europe? I laughed, thinking it was some kind of joke. What? No. They're in Arizona. Mom's having me surgery. Yeah, that's what I thought too. But Rachel paused. My sister just showed me these photos that Cindy sent her. They're definitely not in Arizona. My phone pinged with incoming messages with each new photo that loaded. I felt like I was being punched in the gut. There was Mom looking perfectly healthy, posing in front of the Trevi Fountain, Cindy taking selfies outside designer boutiques in Rome. Mom, Sister Angela, and her daughter Emma, lounging by a private pool at what looked like an expensive villa. Each photo was time-stamped, yesterday's date clearly visible. There's more, Rachel said hesitantly. My sister said, Cindy's been bragging about the whole thing. Apparently your mom bought one-way tickets for everyone herself. Cindy, your Aunt Angela, and your cousin Emma. They've rented some luxury villa for a month, and they're shopping at Aldi's high-end stores and eating at fancy restaurants. I sat there staring at a photo of my mother, my supposedly surgery-bound mother, sipping wine at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the Italian countryside. The $35,000 I'd given her for medical expenses was being spent on a European vacation. I spent the night tossing and turning, looking at those photos over and over. How could they do this? How could they lie so brazenly, taking advantage of my concern about Mom's health? They'd played me using my memories of Dad's illness to manipulate me into giving them money. The next morning, I called Mom. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone. "How did the surgery go?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Oh, it went great. The doctor said everything went perfectly. I'm already starting rehabilitation." I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles turning white. The casual way she lied made me feel sick. "That's wonderful," I said, my voice dripping with barely contained rage. "I'd love to talk to your doctor about the procedure. Could you put him on?" There was a slight pause. "Oh, he's very busy right now, sweetie. Besides, there's no need to bother him. Look, I need to go. They're calling me for physical therapy." The line went dead before I could respond. I sat there staring at my phone, a wave of memories washing over me. Mom giving me away at 12 because she didn't need Dad's money anymore. Mom only reaching out after Dad died and left me his estate. Mom sending me shopping lists, expecting me to fund her lifestyle. And now this. The ultimate betrayal. I decided to play along with their charade, calling Mom every day to check on her recovery. Each time she had a new excuse ready. "The doctor's in surgery right now, honey. He's at a conference today. He's seeing other patients. He's off duty until tomorrow." It was like watching a bad play where the actor keeps forgetting their lines and making up new ones on the spot. I started keeping a list of her excuses, partly out of anger, partly because I couldn't believe how ridiculous they were getting. "Mom," I said during one call, trying to sound concerned, "maybe we could do a video chat. I just want to see how you're doing. Make sure you're comfortable in the hospital." There was a rustling sound on the other end, probably her covering the phone while she consulted with Cindy about what to say next. "Oh, sweetie, I look terrible right now, all swollen and bruised. Plus, the hospital Wi-Fi is awful, keeps cutting out." I could hear Italian pop music playing faintly in the background. "Really?" I pressed that strange for a top medical facility. "Well, you know how these things are," she said quickly. "Listen, I need to go. Time for my physical therapy." The next time I called, I decided to try a different approach. "Mom, just send me the hospital bill directly. I'll wire the remaining $35,000 to their account." "No." She said it too quickly to forcefully, then softening her tone. "I mean, that's not necessary. Just send it to my account and I'll handle everything with the hospital. They know me here now." After that conversation, I stopped calling. Let them sweat a little. I thought, sure enough. A week later, Mom's number appeared on my phone. I watched it ring, imagining her growing panic as she realized the money might not be coming after all. Then came the text. "Jessica, the hospital is demanding payment immediately. They're threatening to send the bill to collections. Please, we need the money right away." I took my time responding, waiting several hours before typing. "No problem. Just forward me the bill from the hospital, and I'll take care of it immediately." Silence followed. 3 days of it. I knew they were scrambling, trying to figure out what to do next. Then, an email arrived in my inbox with the subject line "Urgent Hospital Bill" attached. I opened the attachment and almost laughed out loud. They hadn't even tried to make it look legitimate. The letterhead was blurry, clearly copied from some other document. The date was from 6 months ago. The hospital's address showed California instead of Arizona, and most tellingly, the payment details section listed Mom's personal bank account. I stared at this pathetic attempt at forgery, feeling a mix of amusement and deep sadness. I photographed a stack of $100 bills I'd withdrawn earlier that week, arranging them found, like on my desk. "Got your bill?" I wrote back, attaching the photos. "Sending you money." My finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before I pressed it. "Come on, Mom," I thought. "Let's see what story you come up with next." My phone rang less than an hour after I sent the photos. Mom's name flashed on the screen, and I took a deep breath before answering. "Jessica." Her voice was shrill, panicked. "What's going on? Where's the rest of the money? We've been waiting." "Drop the act, Mom." I cut her off my voice. I called. "I know exactly where you are, and it's not in any hospital." "What are you talking about?" "You're in Italy, at a villa, shopping at designer stores and eating at expensive restaurants with Cindy and Angela and Emma." The line went silent for a moment. I could almost hear her mind racing, trying to figure out how to spend this. "How did you—" She started. "Cindy sent photos to Rachel's sister, who showed them to Rachel, who then sent them to me." I said, "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? I've seen everything. The villa, the shopping trips, all of it. You used my father's death, used my grief and guilt about not being able to save him, to scare me out of money for a vacation." Another pause. Then her voice changed. The fake concern disappeared, replaced by defensive anger. "Fine, yes, we're in Italy. I knew you'd never give us money for a vacation. But why shouldn't we get to travel too? You're always going somewhere. Paris, London, New York. Meanwhile, Cindy and I can barely afford groceries. That's not fair. Not fair." My voice was shaking. Now. "Not fair. Is being 12 years old and hearing your mother trade you away because she didn't need your father's money anymore not fair? Is having that same mother show up 16 years later? Not because she misses you, but because your father died and left you money. We can talk about all that later," she said quickly. "Right now we have a serious problem. We don't have money for tickets home, and we still need to pay the bill. Rental. Everyone needs to get back to work. We can't lose our jobs. Please, Jessica. We need that other $35,000. In that moment, I finally saw everything clearly. Nothing had changed. She was still the same woman who had given me away when I became financially inconvenient. Only now she wanted me back, or rather, she wanted my money back. "That's your problem, not mine," I said flatly. "Goodbye, Mom." I hung up and immediately blocked her number. Then I went through every social media platform, every messaging app, every possible way they could reach me, and blocked them all. Mom, Cindy, Aunt Angela, everyone involved in the scheme. Sitting there in the silence of my apartment, the apartment Dad left me, I felt something shift inside me. The last lingering hope that my mother might actually care about me, might actually want a relationship with her daughter rather than her daughter's money, finally died 2 weeks after I blocked everyone. My grandmother called. I almost didn't answer. But Grandma had always been different from Mom. More honest, more genuine. "Jessica, honey," she said, her voice worried. "Your mother called me. She said she needs $15,000 urgently. I don't have that kind of money, but I thought maybe you." "Grandma," I said gently, "let me tell you what really happened." I told her everything. The fake surgery, the Italian vacation, the scam to get my money. With each detail, I heard her sighs getting heavier. "Oh, Jessica," she said finally. "I'm so sorry. I had no idea Sarah would do something like this." "Don't worry about them, Grandma," I assured her. "They got themselves into this mess. They can get themselves out." As it turned out, I didn't have to wait long to find out how they managed. Rachel called me a few days later. "Have you seen what Cindy's doing on social media?" she asked. I hadn't since I blocked them everywhere. Rachel proceeded to fill me in. "She's running this fundraiser claiming her wealthy sister abandoned them in Italy without money to get home. She's painting you as this heartless rich person who left her poor family stranded in a foreign country." I felt a familiar surge of anger, but this time it was mixed with something else. Amusement. "How's that working out for them?" I asked. "Well, Rachel said they spent almost 2 weeks trying to raise the money. They had to sell all those designer clothes and bags they bought. Apparently, the villa owner was threatening to call the police because they couldn't pay the rent, and get this. They all nearly lost their jobs because they stayed way longer than their approved vacation time." I shook my head, thinking about how their grand European adventure had backfired spectacularly. A month later, Grandma called again with an update. "They're finally back," she said. "But Jessica, it's a mess. Your Aunt Angela isn't speaking to your mother anymore. Apparently, Sarah demanded she help pay for the trip after everything fell apart, and she and I had a terrible fight because I couldn't give her money for tickets home. She actually accused me of choosing you over her. I'm sorry you got dragged into this, Grandma." "Don't be, sweetheart. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions. After we hung up, I walked to the window of my apartment, Dad's apartment, and looked out over the city. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. On my desk, a stack of travel brochures lay waiting. I was planning my next trip, this time to Greece. The old me might have felt guilty about traveling while Mom and Cindy struggled. The old me might have invited them along, tried one more time to build the relationship I'd always wanted with them, but that me was gone, replaced by someone stronger. Someone who finally understood that some relationships aren't worth saving. Dad's last words to me in the hospital echoed in my mind. "You were the best thing in my life, Jessica. Never forget that." I hadn't forgotten, and I finally understood that I'd been lucky. Lucky to have had one parent who truly loved me, who put me first, who taught me my own worth. Mom and Cindy could keep their schemes and manipulations. I had my father's love, his legacy, and most importantly, my self-respect. These days, my life is peaceful. I travel when I want, work hard at my job, and spend time with friends who value me for who I am, not what I can give them. Sometimes I hear bits of news about Mom and Cindy through Grandma. They're still struggling, still playing victims, still looking for their next mark. But their drama doesn't touch me anymore. Story 5. I'm Chloe, and my parents split when I was 14 years old. It wasn't the kind of split that you see in movies. No hurling clothing out of windows or yelling contests. Only two individuals realized they could no longer make it work. Mom began dating again very soon after Dad relocated many states away. Richard came into our life in this way. At first, Richard appeared to be a decent person. He made my mother laugh, wore nice clothes, and had a decent position at some major corporation. However, there was something unsettling about the way he gazed at me. Right from the start. Not in a spooky manner. Worse, in a critical sense. As if I were some sort of issue that required his attention. Your daughter needs some direction. About a month after he moved in, one evening I heard him telling his mother, "She's at that challenging age." Mom's response made my stomach turn when I was standing in the hallway. "I am aware. I'm very happy you're available to assist." However, it didn't help. With a smile that never quite made it to his eyes, it was criticism cloaked in phony concern. Little remarks about my hair or clothes were made at first. Then things got out of hand. I recall the first time he truly affected me. About 6 months after he and his mother were married, it happened over dinner. I was dressed in brand new jeans that I had purchased with my allowance. "Chloe, those jeans are starting to fit you a little tight." Halfway to his mouth, Richard paused his fork and spoke. "You're developing so quickly." Then he muttered something loud enough for me to hear. Mainly, I felt my cheeks burn as tears threatened to spill. "They're supposed to fit like this." I was able to say, "Oh, honey." Mom jumped in. "Richard's just concerned about your health. You know how teenagers can sometimes not notice these things?" That was the pattern. Richard would say something cruel, disguised as concern, and Mom would back him up. Every single time, when I tried to tell her how his comments made me feel, she'd shake her head and say I was being too sensitive. "You need to learn to take a joke, Chloe," she'd say while Richard sat there with that smug little smile of his. "He's just trying to look out for you." I started calling Dad more often after that. Our Skype calls became my lifeline. He'd listen to me, really listen, without trying to explain away Richard's behavior or tell me I was overreacting. He kept paying alimony regularly, which I later learned was more than generous. But money couldn't fix what was happening at home. Everything changed when my half-brother was born. I was 17, trying to focus on my final year of high school, while our house transformed into what felt like a shrine to Richard's perfect little family. Minus me, of course. Mom was completely absorbed in the baby. I mean, I get it. He was tiny and cute and needed constant attention, but it was like I'd become invisible overnight. The only time anyone seemed to notice me was when something went wrong. Like when I accidentally woke the baby by closing my bedroom door too loudly. I expected Richard to get worse after the baby was born, to find even more ways to criticize me. But something unexpected happened. He started traveling for work a lot. Those business trips became my salvation. The house felt lighter when he was gone, like I could finally breathe properly. Even Mom seemed more relaxed. Though she was always counting the days until his return with Richard away so much, my senior year turned out better than I'd expected. I focused on my studies, joined the yearbook committee, and started making plans for college. Real plans, not just daydreams about escape. When graduation day came, Dad kept his promise and showed up. He sat in the audience, beaming with pride as I walked across the stage to get my diploma. Mom was there too, of course, with the baby and Richard. But it was Dad's face I looked for in the crowd. After the ceremony, Dad pulled me aside. I meant what I said before, Chloe. He told me, his hands on my shoulders, "Any college you want. I'll make it happen. You've earned it." I'd already sent out applications to several colleges, hoping at least one would accept me. To my surprise, they all did. But I knew exactly which one I wanted, the one in Dad's city, far enough away that I wouldn't have to come home often, but close enough to someone who actually cared about me. I waited until dinner to tell Mom and Richard. We were sitting at the table, Mom feeding my brother while Richard complained about airline food from his latest trip. I got accepted to all the colleges I applied to. I said during a rare moment of silence, "I'm going to accept the offer from Marshall University." Mom passed with the baby spoon midair. That's where your father lives, isn't it?" I nodded, bracing myself for their reaction. "Well," Richard said, that familiar mocking smile spreading across his face. "Looks like your father finally managed to do something useful with his life paying for college. Who would have thought?" I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. The urge to snap back at him, to tell him exactly what I thought about his useful contribution to my life, was almost overwhelming. But I held my tongue. I didn't want to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose my cool. Mom let out a small sigh of what sounded suspiciously like relief. Maybe she was glad to finally have me out of the way, free to focus on her real family, without the complicated reminder of her previous marriage hanging around. The next morning, I packed everything I could fit into 2 suitcases and a backpack. Mom was too busy with the baby to notice me hauling my bags downstairs, and Richard had already left for work. Dad arranged for a car service to pick me up, and by that evening, I was standing in front of his house, a beautiful 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch. It was so different from the cramped house I had left behind. But it wasn't just the size that struck me, it was the warmth. Sarah, Dad's fiancée, was waiting at the door with him. She wasn't what I'd expected. She was younger than Mom, with bright red hair and paint, stained jeans. She gave me a massive embrace like we were old friends. "We've got your room all set up," she added, taking one of my suitcases. "I hope you don't mind, but I might have gone a touch crazy with the decorations." The room was wonderful, serene blues and elegance, with a window seat facing the lawn. Mel baby weeping, Mel Richards' critical comments, Mel treading on eggshells. Just peace. Mom called that night after she'd found my note. "You could have said goodbye properly," she remarked, feeling wounded. "Your brother was seeking for you all day. He's too Mom. He'll forget I was even there. Soon enough." I spent those first several weeks adjusting into my new life, learning more about Sarah. She had a knack of making everyone feel at ease while teaching art at the nearby high school. We would speak about everything and nothing while occasionally sipping hot chocolate late into the night. Dad offered to help me out totally, but I wanted to be on my own. The Daily Grind, a bustling cafe close to the house, is where I got a job. Although it wasn't a glamorous job, I liked it. My teammates were entertaining, the usual clients were kind, and the tips were reasonable. I moved into Marshall University's dormitories in the autumn. Jenny, my roommate, was a Chicago music major who often brought me coffee and studied violin at strange hours. I was studying business administration and was enjoying my lessons when she returned from her early morning rehearsals. I worked at the cafe in between lectures and study sessions. This was how a year went by, and I was content, very content, until a typical Tuesday afternoon at the cafe turned everything upside down. My stomach dropped when I heard a familiar laugh when I was cleaning tables. Richard was seated at a corner table, but he was not alone himself, and he was most certainly not traveling for work. They were kissing like first dating teens, and he was with a lady I had never seen before. "Lisa, hello." I tried not to shake my voice as I whispered to my coworker, "Could you please take table 12? I must go take a rest." With my pulse racing through the little window in the door, I ducked into the rear room. They were still visible to me. As I took out my phone and began recording, my hands were shaking. Looking at her the way he used to stare at his mother in the early days, Richard was now grasping the woman's hand across the table when they eventually departed. I was still lurking in the rear when Lisa discovered me. What was the purpose of that? With a worried expression, she questioned, "Were those individuals familiar to you?" "The guy?" I spoke slowly. "He is someone I know. I simply didn't want him to notice that I was employed here." "Who was the woman? Do you know?" Lisa's eyes glowed with rumors. "God, oh God, indeed. Catherine Morrison is that person. Everyone is familiar with her. Because of her economic success and charitable endeavors, she is frequently featured in the local press." I had trouble sleeping that night. I couldn't get the picture of Richard kissing that woman out of my head. My fingers shaking, I reached for my laptop at midnight and opened social media, typing Catherine Morrison into the search box. Her profile appeared right away, complete with a confirmed checkmark. Richmond Technologies CEO. In the gloom of my dorm room, I read aloud to myself. Richard was employed by the same firm. He was seeing Catherine Morrison, but she wasn't just any lady. She was the director of the entire firm and his employer. There was more to his affair than that. He was having an affair with his own boss. Things worsened when I scrolled down her timeline. Much worse. Richard appeared in one picture after another, him at business functions. At what appeared to be vacation locations, he was always standing near to Catherine, while the other staff members kept a reasonable distance. Both of them were smiling at the camera as he held the young child, who was about 3 years old. One especially upsetting picture included the message, "My 2 favorite men in the world." I am eager to make it official as soon as possible. Happy family engagement. As I continued to browse, the evidence grew stronger. There were pictures from years and years ago, Richard's numerous work travels. Mom was at home by herself with my brother throughout all of those occasions. He had been creating an entirely different life, replete with a second child. As I began saving the pictures one by one, my hands were trembling so much that I nearly dropped my phone. I downloaded every one of them, even the caption screenshots. Richard was there for what appeared to be the boys' birthday celebration, Christmas supper with Richard and Catherine. On a swing, Richard pushes the youngster. I was really struck by one picture. It showed Richard, Catherine, and their son at a fun fair approximately 6 months ago. It said in the caption, "The ideal family might occasionally appear out of the blue. I am so grateful that my Prince Charming waited patiently for the ideal time to begin our family. At last, true love was meant to be." Have the patience to wait. He was not waiting. He had been telling lies, leading 2 very distinct lives, balancing 2 families like a sick circus performer. Furthermore, it appears from Catherine's posts that she was unaware that she was the other woman. With her attractive subordinate who had captured her heart, she genuinely thought she had discovered her happily ever after. My thoughts were racing as I reclined in my chair. I didn't recognize the Richard in these pictures at all. He was grinning here. Not smirks, but genuine smiles. He gave me everything. He appeared to be truly happy, hugging his secret fiancée, playing with his secret son, and going about his secret life. I whispered to my empty room, "Oh, Mom. How has he affected us?" It was almost 3 a.m. when I checked the time. Sleep was the last thing on my mind, but I had an early class tomorrow. I had to make sure that all of the evidence was saved. This would have to be shown to Mom. Even though it would be detrimental to all parties, the truth had to be revealed. I was on the train, going home, a week later. My stomach was in knots, and the evidence was still burning a hole in my phone. I hadn't disclosed my destination to my father. I couldn't have explained to him why I had to do this. When Mom opened the door, her expression was one of genuine surprise. "We didn't expect you, Chloe." For a brief moment, my younger brother's tottering around her legs seemed almost normal. Richard then emerged from behind them. He said, "Well, well." His voice was already beginning to take on that familiar tone of mockery. "Don't tell me you have to return home after being expelled from college due to poor grades." Mom chuckled, as if it were the most hilarious joke she had ever heard. "Stop it, Richard. Chloe is doing well in school, am I right, honey? I made an effort to smile. In fact, I'm on the dean's list. You are, of course. Richard looked me up and down and grinned. Say that each time I see you, those jeans get bigger and bigger. Is it the new style now? The baggy look. I bet my tongue I'd truly lost weight since entering college. All those cooks rushing about the cafe had schooled me up substantially, but Richard never missed a chance to make jabs at my appearance. The remarks persisted all day, every time I moved. Every time I talked, Richard had something to say. When Mom served supper, everything became much worse. Well there, Chloe, he said as I put some mashed potatoes on my plate. Save some for the rest of us. I kept eating discreetly, eyeing him out of the corner of my eye. This man who sat here ridiculing me was the same one who'd been playing happy families with his boss only last week. The same father who had another child, another life. Honey. He turned to Mom with an overdone, anxious face. We may need to purchase a second refrigerator if Chloe plans to visit more frequently. Mom laughed and looked at him so lovingly that my chest ached. In fact, she didn't know. With all the evidence of his treachery on it, my phone felt heavy in my pocket. Shall I show her? Observing her expression, so devoted to this man who had been deceiving her for years? I paused. Still unsure of what to do, I went upstairs to my former room after supper. However, I was halted on the steps by Richard's voice. Where are you heading, in your opinion? Confused, I turned around. To my chamber. Your space? He chuckled. Now that's my office. Months ago we converted it. Your mother told you, didn't she? My brother was being bounced on Mom's hip when she came into the corridor. Oh, I should have mentioned it. I can take a nap on the sofa. I tried to sound steady as I offered. Richard gave a headshake. You will obstruct the path. Tonight, you'd better return to university. I glanced at my mother, hoping she would disagree and defend my suggestion of an alternative. Rather, she simply nodded. Richard is correct, my dear. You would be better off finding another place to stay tonight. Something broke inside of me. Perhaps it was the way my mother avoided looking at me. Perhaps it was the arrogant look on Richard's face, but I'd had enough. Why do you do this every time? My voice trembled as I turned to face my mother. You constantly side with him, but why? See how he treats me, don't you? How has he consistently handled me? Mom seemed uneasy as she moved my brother to her other hip. You're being dramatic, Chloe. Richard simply enjoys making jokes. You've been overly sensitive all along. Make jokes. I laughed resentfully. Is that considered continual ridicule? The remarks on my life, my clothing, and my weight. Mom? He despises me. I've always been disliked by him. Furthermore, you have never defended me. With that uncontrollable smile remaining on his face, Richard took a step forward. Let's not let this become another one of your adolescent outbursts, Chloe. Quit talking. I took out my phone with shaky hands. You are no longer allowed to speak. I brought the first picture up to his face after pulling it up. It had an instant impact. His cheeks lost all of their color. What is that? Mom looked at the screen and inquired. Richard, what's the matter? Do you want to tell your mother about the types of work travels you have been going on? I go on to the next picture. His other son in the picture. Or perhaps you want to share your fiancé with her. Your boss at Richmond Technologies, you know, the one with whom you are parents. Mom's jaw dropped. I could hear the wall clock ticking since the room was so silent. That's not the case. Finally losing his smile, Richard stuttered. Not what? These pictures are not of your son. Catherine Morrison is not being kissed by you, not the 2-week-old news of your engagement. I looked at my mother. For years, he has been leading a double life. Mom. He has gone on several business travels with his other family members, his other son, and to arrange his wedding to a woman who is unaware that he is already married. You're telling lies. Mom seldom spoke above a whisper. I wish I was. With his employer, he has been unfaithful to you. Together, they have a 3-year-old boy. She believes they will be married and that he is not dating. Quit! My brother started weeping when Mom screamed. Put an end to these terrible falsehoods. You dare. You have no right to fabricate such horrible tales about Richard. I have evidence, Mom. Examine the pictures. Examine the dates. Take a look. Nothing is worth looking at. Richard has always been loathed by you. You have consistently attempted to obstruct us. He's a greater parent to your brother than your own father was to you, and that's why you're envious." Her remarks were like a blow to my head. She rushed to the front door, ripped it open, and flung my backpack onto the front yard while I stood there in disbelief. "Leave now." She was in tears. "Right now." Anger flushed her face. "Leave our residence. I'm done listening to your falsehoods." With legs that felt like lead, I made my way to the door. Richard's smile had become even wider as I walked by him. As I went by, he leaned in close and said in a voice that only I could hear, "Chloe, your mother will always trust me more than you. Keep it in mind." I was in a stupor the whole way back to college via train, my mother's comments replaying in my mind. After a restless night, the next morning, I went to Catherine Morrison's social media page after opening my laptop. Before I clicked, my cursor lingered over the message button for a considerable amount of time. "I need you to know some vital facts about your fiancé, Miss Morrison. Are you open to having a face-to-face meeting?" Within an hour, she responded about Richard. Naturally. "Is everything all right?" At the daily grind, we decided to meet. It was, oddly, her proposal. She was unaware that I was employed there, or that I had initially learnt of her presence at that particular cafe. I changed into my uniform, got to work early, and waited. Catherine Morrison entered the room at precisely 2 p.m. "Catherine," I went up to her table. "My name is Chloe." Her grin was even, pleasant, and sincere. "Sit down, please. In your communication, you looked worried. What's going on here?" "Richard." I inhaled deeply. "I want to apologize to you before I show you anything." "Yes, I am." Her smile wavered. "What am I sorry for?" I took out my phone and went to the gallery of pictures. "This is my mum." I showed her a recent family photo while I spoke. "And here is Richard, her spouse, my stepfather." Catherine gazed intently at the picture. As she reached for her coffee cup, her immaculately manicured hand froze. "I don't get it." My mother and him had been wed for many years. Together they have a 2-year-old boy, my younger brother. I moved my finger to another picture. It was taken during Christmas. "No," she gave a headshake. "No, that isn't feasible. Richard does not have a spouse. According to him, he has never been married. In the spring, we will tie the knot. We have a son. I am aware of your son," I said softly. "Richard informed you he was single, and I am aware of that. He has been leading 2 separate lives, father and husband in one city, father and fiancé in another." Her coffee grew cold as she sat in quiet for a long time. After all this time, she eventually confided to his ailing mother about all those business trips home. He was returning home to his other child, his wife. She chuckled bitterly. "God, what an idiot I am. I made him regional director and gave him 3 promotions. I believed that he loved me." I apologized once again since I had run out of things to say. "Don't be." The CEO mask fell back into place as she straightened her back. "I appreciate you being honest with me. I now realize that he was only taking advantage of my power and position." She got up and gathered her belongings. "I have some calls to make if you don't mind." "Thank you, Chloe, really." With her heels tapping on the floor, I watched her leave the cafe. She held her head high. In spite of everything, compared to my mother, she was stronger. I believed she was capable of facing reality. My phone rang a week after Catherine and I had met. It was Mum, and she was yelling before I could even greet her. "Are you content now?" I had to keep the phone away from my ear since her voice was so loud. "Are you at last content? Everything is damaged by you." "What, Mom?" They let him go. "His employer, that lady. She caused him to lose his job. They discovered infractions after auditing all of his work. He's getting thousands of dollars from them. His career is finished." Her words came in short gasps, and now she was crying. "He will never be hired again by any reputable organization, and you are solely to blame." With my legs feeling weak, I sank down on my bed in my dorm room. "He was unfaithful to you, Mom. He had a different family, a kid. He intended to wed her. You have no understanding," she interrupted me. "He's the greatest thing I've ever experienced. Your sibling deserved no better parent. You have no right to attempt to ruin that. You two were being used by him, Catherine and you. All he was doing was using everyone to his advantage. Do you not notice that? You have no right to discuss him in such a manner. Her tone became icy. I adore this man more than anything in the world, and you have no right to condemn him. Please, Mom, I don't have a daughter. They sounded like bullets. From my perspective, you are no longer there. The cue died. I sat there looking at my phone for a long time. Tears are streaming down my face. When Jenny returned from class, she discovered me in that state. What happened, Chloe? Oh my God. I told her everything. She helped me contact my father, offered me tea, and held me as I sobbed. That evening, he and Sarah came up to see how I was doing. You made the correct decision. Sarah held my hand and continued to speak. Even if doing the right thing might be extremely painful at times, it is still right. It has been a year since then. I continue to work at the cafe and maintain good marks at Marshall University. A little ceremony by the lake marked the marriage of Dad and Sarah. It was lovely. I was also the maid of honor for them. Sarah is expecting a child. I will shortly get a younger sibling. Through common acquaintances back home, I learn about Mom and Richard. He was never hired by another corporation. News of the audit results spread. He began drinking excessively and starting altercations at pubs. To provide for them, Mom had to work at the neighborhood store. Since they can no longer afford a babysitter as they once could, my younger brother is currently enrolled in nursery. I sometimes question if I should feel bad about not being able to sleep. Perhaps everyone would have been better off if I had remained silent. Mom would continue to enjoy her ignorance. Richard would continue to work. My brother's household would be more secure. However, I recall Richard grinning when his mother interrupted him with hushed words. I will always be trusted by your mother more than you are. I recall all the years he spent subtly hurting me, manipulating me, and twisting everything to make me feel insignificant. No, I'm not sympathetic to them. That's the truth. Convenience and comfort aren't always important to it. It simply is. Lies were the foundation of Richard's life, and he had only himself to blame when those lies eventually came to an end.